Your valley is so huge you don't turn me on anymore. Raise the kids yourself. Looking at my pregnant belly, James made a shocking remark, giving an unreasonable reason for divorce. I felt abandoned, as if left on the streets. However, a miracle happened to me. Fine, here are the divorce papers. I had a good reason to accept the divorce. 3 months later, I received frantic calls from him. My name is Catherine, just an ordinary office worker. My life had never been extraordinary. Now, it feels like I am at a peak. Catherine, will you support me? I married James, my boss, who worked in sales at a major general trading company. We began dating when I was 27. At first, I just saw him as a reliable senior at work and didn't pay him any special attention. But after attending a drinking party with him, I quickly realized he was dependable. He was considerate and respected by others, passionate about his work, and I was amazed by his sales techniques. Although I could be considerate, I was very bad at expressing my opinions. It took me several years to be able to speak my mind. James passionately coached me, and I naturally became attracted to his enthusiasm. Perhaps he noticed my feelings because he started to approach me more frequently. Right after he was promoted to section chief, we began our relationship. A year into our relationship, he proposed to me. Today, we finally made it to the finish line. Honestly, I felt elated, as if I was ascending to heaven. This was probably the first time I felt so overjoyed. Having had no romantic experiences, let alone serious relationships with men, I thought falling in love with James was pure destiny. That is, until things took a turn for the worse. A year after marrying James, I was carrying a new life inside me. I left the hospital excited, wondering how James would react. But when I told him about the pregnancy, his response was devastatingly unexpected. "You're pregnant." He showed utter inconvenience, perfectly mirroring his words. "Didn't you marry me to support my life? Weren't you on birth control pills?" I was shocked. As we were building our life after marriage, I had always wanted children. I thought James would be just as happy, but the reality was the exact opposite. James never wanted kids. He saw me as a housemate. I realized this during our discussion about my pregnancy. "Birth control? You never mentioned anything about birth control." His words were too cruel. I couldn't help but become emotional and snapped back. At that moment, a heavy sigh escaped from James' lips. "You just don't get it. You were trash, you used to work for me, and can't even assume that doing what's not being taught is basic. Is your brain too hollow to understand that?" Saying this, he tapped my head with his index finger. The force and emphasis of his words made me feel his frustration and disgust. I was supposed to be happy about this news. Why did he even marry me? As I thought this, he revealed another shocking truth. "I thought you could at least handle the household chores when I married you. I might consider getting a divorce." His words, which felt almost like a threat, depleted my heart. Overwhelmed by sadness and unable to speak, James, with a smirk, added, "Before I married you, I was actually thinking of hiring a maid. I really hate doing household chores, but you liked me, didn't you? You never went against my opinions, and I heard you were good at household tasks. I thought it would be a win-win situation for both of us. It seems like you fooled me." His unbelievable words made me sadder than angry. Fearful of showing my tears, I bit my lip, trying to distract myself with the pain. "I never wanted a child with you. Who asked for you to get pregnant? You should have taken birth control as you were told. That's on you." My heart was filled with regret for marrying him. Of course, he later demanded that I get an abortion, but I firmly refused that request. Until I could find a way to support myself, I had no choice but to do as he said. I begged him, pressing my head to the ground, pleading for the sake of the child. As a result, I remained by his side, but only as a housemate. I was his wife in name only. In exchange for not being involved as a couple, I was allowed to give birth to the child. "I'll provide money, but I won't take care of the kid at all. You're on your own with that." His words, as if he was pushing the responsibility of a pet onto me, pierced through my heart. I had quit my job when I married him because of his requests. If I returned to my previous job, I would have to see James every day after our divorce, and I absolutely couldn't stand that. Until I found a new job and secured a stable income, I had to endure this life. With those thoughts, I felt despair every day. "If you take care of the house properly, I'll work outside. All you need to do is be thorough with the household chores." I was aware that he was bad at household chores even when we were dating. I naively thought he was relying on me. Perhaps this was one of the reasons he wanted to marry me. No matter how much emotional abuse I endured from him, I couldn't escape him, especially now that we had a child. Leaving him, who had an above-average income, would mean plunging into poverty. Which is better, to have a child live in poverty or live in a house with no love? When faced with this harsh binary choice, another tragedy befell me. It was the news of my parents' death. After getting married, I could only see my parents about once a year. The only time I was allowed to return home was during the 3 days he was away on a business trip. If you leave the house, what am I supposed to eat? I couldn't just leave him food. He said such self-centered things. Hence, those rare trips home were the few pleasures in my life, a reward for my daily hard work. I was planning to report about my child as the only filial duty I could offer, but even that was taken away from me. I felt like I had hit rock bottom in my life. A while later, I received an email. I didn't recognize the sender, and feeling a bit uneasy, I opened it to find its shocking content. If you read this letter, please contact me anytime. Along with the message was the sender's phone number and a photo. Seeing that picture made me believe the content of the letter was true. I immediately called the number written in the letter while crying. I explained everything and decided to meet them. You want to see your relatives with your status as a housemate. How can you be so selfish? What about my meals during that time? Please, I need to deal with my parents' affairs and go through the procedures. I haven't even properly informed them about our child. They are asking to see me just this once. I don't have money to fund your outings. If you go, pay with your own money. I was constantly bombarded with cold, hurtful words. However, they no longer had the power to hurt me. My heart had become so numb that I could simply ignore his words. But for some reason, James, who was usually so harsh, suddenly brightened up as if he had an idea. Wait a second. I just remembered I have a business trip. You can go home for about 3 days, just come back before I return. That was unusual. It was unlike James to give me such freedom, but the reason for this sudden leniency would become clear later on. Having received James' permission, I returned to my hometown and met the sender of the letter. It was my maternal grandparents on my mother's side. My grandfather was American and my grandmother was Japanese. My mother spent her early years in America, but with an interest in Japanese culture, she came to Japan to study during her college years. That's where she met my father and got married. However, their marriage was not easily accepted. My grandparents strongly wished for her to stay in America and were against the marriage. The two eloped and couldn't even come to Japan until they heard the sad news of the passing of both. To be honest, we had forgiven them a long time ago, but we didn't know how to face them. I really regret being such a stubborn fool. If I had known this would happen, I would have welcomed their marriage. Upon hearing of their death from an acquaintance, the two were filled with sorrow and seemed to regret their actions. They blamed themselves for their passing. While I was lost in these thoughts, it seemed that the same acquaintance told them about me, their grandchild. They were worried about how I was doing and had also heard that I was pregnant. It might be hard for you to accept us considering what we did to your parents, but please understand we are always on your side. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I promise to protect you no matter what. If things get tough, don't ever think you're alone, okay? You can always depend on us. Without hesitation, tears welled up in my eyes as my grandmother, Eleanor, softly held my hand. Her warmth was comforting. After struggling for so long to protect the child in my belly, their warmth revived the numb feeling in my heart. Seeing me sob like this, my grandparents were both surprised and gentle, inquiring with concern about what had happened. When they learned of my current situation, they were furious and entrusted me with something. You don't have to endure such a life anymore. We will help you. Please let us. All you need to think about is yourself and the baby. Don't worry about finances. Take care of yourself. Encouraged by their supportive words, I decided to get a divorce. I had to exact revenge on my husband. However, before I could act, it was James who made the first move. As soon as I returned to our house, an enraged James confronted me with a letter from my grandparents. What is this letter? You went through my desk without permission. It's my house. I can do whatever I want. Even if it's your own house, there's something called privacy. What's with you today? You seem different talking back to me like that. I truly believed his ability to detect even the slightest change in me was remarkable. However, even if he read the letter, it wasn't a big deal. The letter only mentioned the existence of my grandparents and there wasn't any particular issue with it. Yet James used that letter as a reason to suggest divorce. I bet you lied about meeting this old geezer and old lady in the letter. You went back to your hometown to date some guy, didn't you? What? Don't think you can fool me with such an obvious lie. I know you've been using the internet or some trick to have fun behind my back. You're a cheater. Wait a minute, how did you come to that conclusion? You know best that I don't have time for such things, don't you? I couldn't comprehend his absurd insinuations. My stomach hurt and I had a headache. It was just too much. You've never done anything like that before. Do you think you can deceive me with such an obvious lie? Don't underestimate me. He wasn't listening at all. I felt a sense of discomfort towards James, who was trying to trap me with such an excessively forced excuse. I'm disappointed in you. Not that I had much expectation to begin with. So what? Normally, at this point, one would present evidence of their innocence, proving that what James was saying was absurd. However, as I was contemplating divorce, I thought differently. I deliberately let James continue, wanting him to utter the next words. Let's get a divorce. Our marriage was basically out of mutual interest anyway. You've grown fat and unattractive. Raise the kid yourself. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. He got exactly what he wanted. I pulled out the divorce papers he had left and presented them to James. Great, here are the divorce papers. Sign them and I'll take them tomorrow before you change your mind. Why do you have this? I'm your housekeeper. Cleaning the house and finding something like this is a piece of cake. That's a lie. The truth is I had noticed the divorce papers he left on his desk as a threat a long time ago. He slyly conveyed that he could dispose of me anytime, making sure I lived in fear of him so I wouldn't retaliate. I lived every day in fear of that single piece of paper. You're quite confident all of a sudden. Can you, with zero life skills, really survive without me? Don't underestimate me. I won't rely on someone like you anymore. I will protect my child with my own strength. In reality, it was a gamble. I was anxious inside, wondering what would happen if James suspected my sudden boldness. However, I had a hunch about why James proposed the divorce at this time. Therefore, I knew that he would not retract his divorce proposal and that this situation was also favorable for him. Oh, really? Then raise that kid on your own. Since we're divorcing on mutual terms, I won't have any involvement with you or the child. That kid isn't mine, and you don't ever come in contact with me. Promise? Fine, this is goodbye. Thus, when I was about 9 months pregnant, our marriage ended. I divorced James. With some savings from when I was single, I could quickly pack my belongings and leave this house. As planned, I headed to my grandparents' place and settled some matters there. Later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. I named him with hopes for his strong and resilient growth. My son grew up so fast, and my grandparents and I enjoyed watching him grow, living fulfilling days. 3 months later, I received a call from an unknown number. As I picked up the call, my expression turned sour. What the hell is going on? Explain. His shaking voice was so high-pitched I almost wanted to retort. Initially, I thought it was a woman calling me. I instinctively pulled the receiver away from my ear. The discomfort grew just hearing that voice, a chill going inside my head. I wanted to end the call immediately, yet as I continued to listen, he rattled on. You established a company. I never heard of this. Where in our marriage did you stash away that kind of money? That money is mine. Return it right now, you deceitful woman. Obviously, the voice belonged to James, who had somehow learned about my new company. Do you think someone was using your money? He started berating me, hurling accusations at me like a debt collector. I let out a sigh of disbelief at James' accusations, but I replied with utter calm. On what basis are you calling this a scam? There's no evidence that I stole your money. Shut up, you conniving. You probably took extra living expenses from me and secretly saved it. Even if that were true, there's no way I could have saved enough to start a company. The living expenses you gave me barely covered a month's worth. Don't be ridiculous. Then how did you get so much money? There's no job that would have given you such an income when you were unemployed and living with me. You just didn't know I had assets worth $1.1 million right before our divorce. What? $1.1 million. James's voice rose in surprise, stunned by the revelation. He choked on his words. How did you get that much money? The elderly couple I talked about are my maternal grandparents. They are the chairpersons of a globally renowned computer software company. Before divorcing you, I met them and received a bank book they had been saving for me. They always set money aside for their future granddaughter. What? He must have been completely taken aback. It was easy to imagine him being utterly astonished. Right after the divorce, I immediately proceeded with changing the account's name. My grandparents, who live in a distant country, have limited time when they come to my country. There was a need to hurry for smooth processing. Thankfully, the name change was completed the day they arrived in Japan, and I was able to access the money. My mom told me that my grandparents passed away when I was little. I didn't know that they had been estranged. When they found out about my situation, they decided to support me. They promised to take care of me. Upon learning the truth behind our divorce, James was furious. He started spouting words that made him seem hypocritical, given that he was the one who had rashly decided on the divorce. If I had known that, I wouldn't have divorced you. You have some nerve. You never tried to understand my situation. That's because you're terrible at explaining things. Is that why you're constantly fighting with your new wife, trying to shift the blame as always? How? How do you know that? Probably not expecting that I knew about his personal matters, James seemed lost for words. His frantic reaction was rather amusing. I wouldn't notice. It's obvious. We worked together. I didn't need to dig for information. The secret came to me. But don't worry, I'm genuinely relieved that you are marrying the boss's daughter. There's no chance of us getting back together, and I don't have to deal with you anymore. You don't have to be so harsh. We used to love each other. We can still reconcile, can't we? What? What are you talking about? I responded coldly, not even trying to comprehend what he meant. He seemed taken aback by the lack of warmth in my words. James remained silent, struggling to find the right words. Who said I want to get back together with you? I felt relieved after our divorce. I have a child now, and my grandparents have been so kind. I finally found my happiness. Let your wife deal with your nonsense. I don't want anything to do with you. Having regained my emotions, I recalled the painful days with James, and the anger I had suppressed exploded towards him. Hearing my words, James flinched, probably realizing that I had lost all affection for him. However, he started offering different terms. Well, can you give me some money then? She's incredibly high maintenance, and I barely have any spending money left. She's demanding, selfish, can't do housework properly, and she goes out almost every night. You have $1 million, right? Can you spare me some? Don't be ridiculous. I don't have a single penny left for you. Stop saying such things for your convenience. James, choked by my statement, let out a surprised exclamation. What? I used all the money to establish my company and buy a new house. I don't have $1.1 million left. I'm sorry for nothing. I had expected James to find out about my situation somehow, and considering his greedy nature, it was predictable that he'd come asking for money. That's why I thought of converting my money into fixed assets. So, I quickly bought a new house, used most of the funds to establish a nursing facility with a nursery, and spent the rest on the house. Thanks to this move, the facility is quite popular. It's loved by mothers in the same situation as me. It's fully equipped and designed to ensure single mothers can live independently. I got advice for the company's website and systems for my grandparents and did a lot of research myself using social media. I thoroughly researched what single parents want in a workplace, what kind of jobs are in demand, and established my own company to fulfill all these needs. I can't believe you're running such a successful business, James stammered. I was always so irritated by your condescending attitude. Now I can tell you, you thought you could do anything and saw me as trash, but you were so wrong. I hope you regret leaving me for the rest of your life. Your regret won't change anything. Wait, Catherine. Please give us another chance. I'll do anything you want. Kneel, clean your house, anything. You must be joking. I would never get back with you even if it killed me. Live happily with your current wife, and please never tell my son you're his father. After that, it seemed like he was shouting something, but I unceremoniously ended the call. I blocked his contact and changed my number. When I told my grandparents about the contact from James, they arranged everything from security cameras at my home, ensuring he couldn't approach me. If you want, we can even get you a bodyguard, they offered, showing an overly protective stance which made me smile with appreciation and a bit of embarrassment. Since then, James has been struggling in his married life with the CEO's daughter. It's said that he's being dominated and drained of his own salary. Every time I hear stories about him from my former colleagues, it feels like whiskey tastes better. Colleagues who heard the story from me began to disdain him, and it became evident to others as well. Eventually, James earned a reputation at work as the unfaithful man. As a result, his standing in the company plummeted. It's said he's continuing his job under much stress and constraint. He is the husband of the CEO's daughter after all. He's probably living the hellish life, unable to resign even if he wants to. Colleagues would joke, and I'd join in the laughter in agreement. Thus, I finally regained a peaceful life. My son, showered with love from his great-grandparents, is growing up healthily. It's almost 10 years since he was born, and I've taught him everything about James without hiding any details. I won't become a man like that. Don't worry, I'll always protect you, Mom, he'd say, making me swoon with his prince-like words every day.